Don't worry about that. I'm glad you could all make it today. It's the first artist talk that we're hosting in about 2.5 years now. Glad to have George. Been a fixture in this community since the 1960s. So everybody should know him by now. If they don't, they should get to know him by now. Anyway, I'm going to turn the floor over to George.
Thanks, Bob. Well, it's nice to see such a happy-looking, wonderful crowd here today. And I should thank Bob for the hanging, which is always he does a really nice job, I think, of placing things, so that they work off one another very nicely. So about 2 years ago, I decided to start a series of animal drawings and prints. And my first thought was to go back to the zoo. I've been at the zoo a number of times over the years drawing. And I thought, well, I'll get a zoo membership and then I'll just go there, I can go when there aren't crowds around and so on. And then a couple of things. One, I began to realize that I wasn't a spring chicken anymore, and that there are long distances between cages at this point. And so it would be making a few sketches and then slog, 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 slog to the next cage, and then and I thought there must be maybe some other way for me to do this. The other thing about the zoo is that the direct contact with the animals is wonderful, but they also move, or they just sleep, or they decide to go back into the protective house that's there. And then the monkeys, on the other hand, are too active, and you only get a couple of seconds with each one. So then I began to think, well, there's another way to do this. And many of you know about the artist morgue, it's called. So I think it started mostly with illustrators who would keep all kinds of clippings and photographs and things. There are a couple of more seats up here on it. For their use, whenever they had an assignment, they could go to their morgue and they could see what images they had to work from. Well, and I have one that I've been keeping for years and years, and it's in folders and categorized and so on. And I don't look at it very often. It's nice to have it as a kind of backup, or I can go to it for ideas and stuff. But in this case, I decided to go to our common morgue, which is Google, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's so much more thorough and far-reaching than any artist morgue that you could gather together. Also on my screen, my access to Google is Safari, which is kind of an afterthought. But I did start using that as the source for drawing. And as I say, it's just a wonderful source, because you can there are pages of photographs, some interesting, some not so interesting. You can separate the ones out that you want to use later. You can bring it full screen. The scale of these drawings is that I needed to have something that I could sit in front of the screen and draw. And so it's I made a little backing easel that I put clamped on the edge of the table. And all of these were made that way, looking into the screen. There's also the YouTube is a wonderful source, and you get all kinds of short and longer movies, videos of animals. Many of them shot by amateurs when they're on an actual safari, and you can hear the voice and you're looking out through the car window and the lions are right up close. And then many others where they've caught something very unusual because it's just happenstance that they're there, certain kinds of actions between animals. And all of that is fodder for what I've done here. So what I'm trying to do with the drawing, these are all pen drawings. And I love the pen because whatever you put down, the paper is always there. Even if you're making mass lines, you're never completely covering it as you do with paint and could with a brush, where you want a tone, just put the tone in. The paper's gone. The paper is always there, and if you look at them that way, you see light inside all the shadow in the drawings, and that I love that aspect to it. The other thing is that in drawing these, I've been a figure painter for years and years and years, and then worked directly from the figure and photographs of figures and all of that. And when I took up this subject with many of the animals, I realized that I'm not looking that carefully, that closely, and I would, for instance, be drawing the gorillas, for instance. And my tendency was I couldn't make the snout long enough. And somehow the gorillas kept looking like angry old men or something. And it was a lesson back to me about how even artists don't necessarily look with precision all the time. I mean, we're human beings who have a lot of other things to use our eyes for, like not getting out in front of a truck or bumping into someone on the sidewalk and so on. And we're not always looking with the intent to draw, so we're not always looking precisely at things. And it's one of the exciting things about getting involved with a new subject matter like this, is that I was learning both what I'm seeing and not seeing, and then learning something about particular other sentient beings. So there's a lion, I know generally what a lion looks like, but only with this project am I looking that specifically. And also with the pen, I'm not laying it out, plotting it out, and then filling it in any sense. The pen is loose, and I'm finding it, just like the sense is that there's a lion there, and my pen is finding it, and it's finding it it can be over and over again. It takes a lot of, if it's a small pen, which I like to use, just an awful lot of lines to begin to get it dark. So that gives you a chance for your eyes to keep saying, oh, there's more of an indentation here. Oh, there's more of a hump here. Oh, I missed this entirely. I'm just going to go up the other way. And It's exciting for that reason. And it's exciting, I think, for the same reason that when I was a little kid drawing, you have a blank piece of paper and you start putting a line on it and you realize that you have the ability to close these lines up and get something that looks three-dimensional. I mean, there's a magic to it. And that magic is not, you don't leave it behind. You know, if you're an artist, it stays with you, but it needs renewing. And this is sort of what I feel this, a lot of the drawings particularly have given me, is that kind of renewed sense of magic where I get it to a certain point. You know, all drawing is fun when you start it. And then halfway through, if you're trying to make it into something, it gets to be a little bit of a job there somewhere in the middle. And then if it works, you're again free and you're happy about it at the end of the drawing. If you're not, then it's not going to work. You know, you overworked it. It's dead now. Go throw the paper away. Start over again. But so that's one thing. That's a big thing about it. In drawing that way, I'm usually drawing two ways, I think. One is that I'm discovering, and I've just talked about that, where I'm really discovering what I'm seeing and what I'm not seeing. And I'm discovering where that animal is. He's there somewhere in the paper, and I'm trying to find it. The other way is that when I become more familiar, say, with a gorilla, then I begin to get more of a notion about what aspect of that gorilla I want to portray. So I'm aiming. I start drawing aiming at something. I'm aiming to say, you know, he walks on his knuckles and he's got huge arms and some of that I'm finding in just investigative drawing. But this other aspect is where you start with a notion about what you want to project. And I think both of these can exist at once. And in some of the drawings, if you look at them that way, you can see that there's more of an intent to say something already knowing something about the form that I feel confident about. So the drawings preceded the prints over here, and the prints. Some of the drawings, if you look at them and then look at the prints, you'll see that they actually are pretty direct studies for what happens in the print. And then in other cases, that's not represented here. It's represented by another drawing which I make, which is maybe using one of these drawings, but transcribing it for the way it will be in the print. I mean, what a print should do, what a print needs to do, that's beyond just be obviously a pen drawing, because these aren't pen drawings. So I'll show you, I'll go on a little bit and then you can ask some questions if you like. These are all reduction lino cuts. And I brought, I always like show and tell. So I brought, here's the elephant matrix. In the first place, this is some stuff that it's linoleum, but it's linoleum that's made for artists. It's very, very rubbery, cuts very easily. And one of the advantages of that is that each of these is done from only one block. So in most print mediums, you use a separate block for each color. This one uses the whole, only one block for whatever color is there. So what you're doing is printing the main color usually, and then printing, then reducing it by cutting everything away that you don't want to print in the second color. And finally, you wind up with not much left on the plate. I mean, the image is pretty much gone, but what's left here, you can look at afterwards, look at some of this up closer. And you can see that the elephant, for instance, the cutting, for one thing, they're all done on black paper. So wherever I cut the first shapes, what you see there is not a printed black, it's the black of the paper that's allowed to come through. So with the elephant, that darkish purple was the first color printed over everything that was there at the time. Then I wanted a lighter section to the elephant, so everything was cut away except where those light shapes are, and you can still see those on this block. So that then I was able to ink just that part with a lighter color, and by keying it doesn't block out anything else that I've cut, because even where there are small lines, if I key the paper right, there's no jarring to it. It doesn't start blocking out things. So I can sometimes go over it 4 or 5 times with different colors and still keep the integrity of what's already there. It's an exciting way to work. The one, let's see, what else do I have here? The zebras. This stuff can be cut apart and stuck back together too very easily. It's a nice flexible thing to work with. This is the zebra print. And that violet blue of the sky and that takes place down here was the last thing printed. That's why it's still on the plate, but the zebras have been eliminated. It's, I do spend time making the form, and then because of the medium, I have to destroy it, which hurts my heart a little bit because I'd like to keep it, but it's within the medium, it's not useful. And this is in 2 pieces because at one point there was a zebra, one of the 2 zebras, as I proofed it, didn't please me. I had gone too far with the cutting. So I just turned the whole thing over and started again and printed it together, and there it is. You don't know there's another zebra underneath.
You have to keep one.
Yeah, that's right. But I got to keep the one that didn't work very well. Sometimes, once in a while, the main cutting in the piece, the main cutting can be preserved because what you're doing with the color is in other areas mostly. This is the one on the card, the invitation card, and that's the print for it back here. And there's some of this gorilla left, and the latter parts of it were the greenish color down here, and then the violetish colors and the yellow. So I cleaned it off at the end, but that's all that That's all that remains on the block. It's a method that was invented by Picasso at one point. As he was such a great inventor, he did some beautiful prints with it. And then since then, it's become a method that artists regularly use. I find that doing it on the black paper gives for one thing, the cutting is very direct. Whenever I cut a line, it's a black. In fact, there's more of my work, a little bit earlier work around back here, and you can see a couple of prints where they're done on white paper, and then the cutting is a white line. But if I want a black line working on white paper, I've got to cut away both sides of the black line, which means that it's not nearly as fluid as the cutting in these, where I can just decide that something will do that in the background and just do it. And it becomes a nice line that reveals either black or some other color that's underneath. I think I'll pause now, and if you want to ask questions, just raise your hand. Tom?
Yeah, I had a question about the content of the pieces. Is there an underlying concern for the fact that a lot of the animals are clearly endangered or extinct? Is there kind of a reverence for nature, which I assume is in your work anyway? But a lot of them I noticed are also, it seems like most of them are from Africa.
Yeah.
And I know that some of these species are really in trouble.
Right. They're all, pretty much all.
Yeah, it's really scary.
There's a subtitle which I think it's on the website somewhere. So it's called Animalia, and then the subtitle is an homage to our fellow endangered passengers. So that's my my political slogan kind of that I'm throwing in there, which it's in back of what I'm doing. I think is to really take a hard look at them and say, these are terrific creatures. These are wonderful, magnificent. And one reason for doing the African ones is that they are so big and hardy and magnificent looking, you know. But there are a lot of more domestic ones that I could do too and will. I'm not through with doing these. I've started a couple of paintings from these, and so that'll be sort of what I'm doing. But that's a good question, and as we know, it's the background for this. It's not the reason, but it's the endangered quality. The endangered fact of the method. Most of these animals are 10 times less than they were 100 years ago. They're down, like I think I've run across a lot of reading and doing these, and the elephants are doing a little better than some of the others. Rhinos and hippopotamus are not doing well at all. They're poached for ivory. The hippopotamus for ivory in their tusks, and they're down to like 20,000 out of 200,000.
George, in the realm of astrology and mythology, people talk about totems, about animals that they identify with in a very profound and personal way. They have an affinity for that particular animal because there's a recognition that there's something in the animal that is me, so to speak. I'm wondering if you, as you were working on it, the variety of animals that they show, felt a particular affinity to one animal or, a few animals in a sort of a deeply emotional and personal way, rather than, oh, this is just really an incredible animal that I'm enjoying drawing or representing.
Well, no, I can't say that I identify with one particular one, but I think in every case, I identify with each one while I'm drawing it too. I mean, it's not like an object. It's more than an object out there that I'm drawing. This is something that can't be quantified exactly, but I feel a real empathy when I'm drawing these animals, and even like the crocodile. These animals are all just doing what God put them there to do. They're finding food and all of that, and they don't make any judgments about what they're doing. Some of it's very interesting, some of it's painful to watch, but no, I do empathize with them, all of them, I think. There is some amazing stuff on YouTube. There was one case where someone had told me a tiny little baby hippopotamus. He was about this big. They're practically like a football or something. It was around. And he had been lost, I guess. He was on the bank, and there was a huge crocodile laying on the bank, sleeping. And the person filming this, it was an amateur film, and you could hear this woman's voice saying, "Oh no, don't come there." And the baby was rooting around, just innocently going up to the crocodile, sniffing it. And at one point, the crocodile, I figure he must have just eaten recently and didn't care about it, because he sort of looked like this, and the baby came up behind him, still sniffing, and he sort of ignored it and went back to sleep. And the baby hippo snuggled up against it and went to sleep. And any other time, it would have just been a meal. And then they kept filming, and at one point, then the crocodile did wake up, and he again sort of looked at this funny creature behind him, and he just slid down into the water and left. Boy, more price. Yes.
Hi, Mr. Johanson. I was here the other day when you were here, and you were explaining to some other people about that more abstract, the black and whites over there,
Yeah.
grayscale. And I didn't really have time to hear what you said about that, but I also wanted to say that this year I finally read Water for Elephants and the sequel to that. And has that been any part of your, have you read those books or seen the films, or has that been any part of your inspiration for this?
Well, I haven't read that book. I have read.
It's a must read.
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
I would say so. And the other one too, it's about primates that are, they're poisonous. It's sort of that.
Okay.
But you'll like it because there's, and you, what other media do you work in? Are you a musician as well, or do you do other?
Not a musician. I do painting and mostly painting. Besides printmaking.
And sculpture.
And some sculpture. Yeah. But thanks for mentioning this. And I do want to say that there are these monotypes, which are a series which I did about 15 years ago. This whole group of more abstract ones, and they were done after visiting the caves in France, and a long-time interest of mine in caves. There's a little explanatory photograph here on the wall, and these were inspired by Chauvet Cave, which is about the oldest of the caves where there's really beautiful fleshed out imagery of animals and just a terrific cave. It happens to be twice as old as Lascaux. Chauvet Cave is around 35 or 36,000 years ago. But it's so far back. It's close to the time when you know we might know in the future how. I mean, they'd be pushing the time back, but not. It's somewhere around the time when human beings first became able to do imagery. And there's a pendant rock that hangs down from the roof in that. And the roof is quite high there. And the rock comes down to within 4 feet of the floor or something. So it's like a phallus to start with. And then it has on it an image of a bull's head and the lower part of a woman from the waist down, the crotch area and legs. And there's no Rosetta Stone for this stuff, you know. So it's referred to as the Venus and the Sorcerer, which is fine. I mean, the thing about it is that it seems to represent the power of whatever god they had, and they're being in awe of the reproductive thing. I mean, babies. I mean, making new human beings. So I just found that a very powerful image and very singular. It's not in other caves. There's no relationship like that in other caves. And yet this goes back so far. So these monotypes are a response to that. I just wanted to see what kind of variations I could make on woman bull and getting them interchanged and overlapped and so on. So you'll have to look at them with that in mind, I hope, and see. And I also wanted a sense of being in the caves. So they're dark, but they have a lot of texture and stuff that I worked to find and manipulate. That also seems, particularly since it's bull representing the power of nature, it seems to relate back to the current paintings and prints. Any more questions?
How many prints can you pull off of those before they degrade? Do you go till they degrade? You just
I could pull a lot of prints. I don't know how many, just lots and lots. I could pull probably with care 100 or so. But particularly since they're reduction linos, each state is lost.
right.
And if I decided to print 100 of something, I would have to. I don't have a color spot for these. I do it by instinct as I'm working on them. So a blue color will make me wonder what happens if I turn to red over it and things like that. That's the way I want to do it. If I were doing 100, I'd have to have a plan, and I'd have to do all the cutting. It would be much more stiff, I think. I could do it, and it could be done, but so there are only 10 of these chickens because I don't want to spend all the time printing, and it takes long enough to do 10 of each color. So there's a bunch of prints, and each one, and they also get to be like paintings in that I don't have a plan. So like with the crocodile, there are a bunch of other small bits of color printed into it, and I can do some of those by making little shapes and inking them and putting them in a stamp. So stamping it, not putting it known as collage. And one can do that endlessly. Once I do that, I try to make each one the same, you know, so there is an addition. So that answers everybody's questions.
First, I wanted to talk about the Chauvet caves.
Oh, I did.
Monotypes.
Yeah, I did, Bob. You probably didn't do that. There's a terrific movie that probably a lot of you have seen called Cave of Forgotten Dreams. In fact, it's on, I just saw yesterday that it's on Netflix, so any of you that have that together. Werner Herzog takes you into the cave, and you'll see this. You'll see this pendant rock, which he talks about in that. Okay,